Okay, welcome back to our final session, and congratulations on your endurance if this is the third one of the morning for you. So the final one is a discussion around the state of the market and how we can actually help write more protection. On my right I have Craig Brown, who is Intermediary Director from L&G. On my left I have Jackie Leiper, who is Protection Director for Scottish Widows, and on my far left we have Carl Hurd, who is National Account Manager from LV. I can start with you, Jackie, first. Both the previous sessions have touched on potential negative industry stories about surveys of people thinking we'll only pay 40–50% of claims. We know that the financial magazines in the weekend like to put up the stories of when you haven't paid rather than all of the ones that you pay. How do we get over this? How do we get that message out to people that 95, 96, 97% of claims are paid?
I think there's a couple of things. So I think we've seen a few providers, ourselves included, trying to present our claims information in a more consumable way. So more engaging, more simple terminology, and really reinforcing that we do pay claims. We are all here with the aim of paying claims out. And, you know, splitting that across life cover, critical illness. I think the other really good initiative that we saw was the 7 families. So really trying to bring case studies, and people do associate with people like them. So I think there's more we could do to promote those case studies and get more of the positive stories out into the media. But certainly all of the research that we've done, when consumers can see other people's stories and where you've helped them, that's what resonates most.
Carl?
Yeah, I think it does depend on the publication you read as well, in fairness. You know, it's the headline reads better for them if it says, you know, we didn't pay out and there's either an advisor or a provider that's to blame. You know, the headline doesn't work if it says actually claim paid, everybody's financially stable and great news. So I think it does depend what clients and advisors are reading. But there's plenty of material, as Jackie said, that we produce, case study material, not just ourselves, but also within the likes of 7 families, where, as I said, advisors can use that material to get clients to really appreciate that we are here for a purpose and we will pay claims.
And Craig, Jackie mentioned that we are paying them, but a lot of the statistics say we paid 98% of claims that we could do.
Yeah.
Again, is that still muddying the waters a little bit? Do we need to explain what we mean by that easier?
I don't think so. I think certainly legal in general, we paid just under 99% of term claims. Income protection, I think, is around 95%. And critical illness, we're sort of paying 93%. So I think we're all in the business of paying claims, and clearly there seems to be no news in good news stories. But you know, for me, insurance is a brilliant news story, and I think we should all be, you know, real advocates of what we do and how we do it. A lot of my background is in claims, actually. So actually seeing insurance at the point of claim, there's no better value or no more powerful product for me. So I think collectively, I think as the guys have said, I think there's lots of information there. I think making it more relevant and more punchy, and I think there's lots of options around different media, different ways of engaging with advisors and customers is probably the way to go.
And is there something that we could do to make it easier for an advisor to give that information out to the client and not just rely on the providers all the time?
No, absolutely. I think the advisor plays a critical role. I think we all know customers don't wake up thinking about life insurance, but it's very, very much for me the best value product you can buy. I mean, it's you know, it's great value. Getting that through I think advisors play an absolutely critical role in sort of conveying that message and bringing to life the stories of the consequences of not having insurance as much as the real benefit of having it. You know, Legal in General's paid out, I think, £606 million in the last 12 months on personal protection claims. There's a lot of families helped. There's 12,000 customers there. Without protection, would have had their lives devastated. So I think if advisors can, you know, really understand those stats and the potential impact on people's lives, you know, it's a really good way of engaging customers with protection.
And do we need to start that engagement earlier? So we spoke again earlier about not enough advisors coming into the market. How do we get more advisors? But it also educating the consumer earlier about the value of protection. So, you know, we see a lot of banks going into schools now and doing lessons on financial stability and how to manage money. Is this something that providers could or should be doing to make children understand the need for protection also, and then the career-wise as well?
I think, you know, if you look at savings, for instance, so savings, I think it's around the age of 7 that we start to embed savings into children's minds, you know. I'm not saying we should start embedding the thought of claims on protection policy at the age of 7, but I think as advisors, when you're talking to clients, it's not being afraid to actually bring to life some of the parts of products that do relate, for instance, to children's benefits. And actually, I think we all have responsibility as parents to actually bring our children through life, making them aware of the things that aren't quite so nice. So, if you are experiencing a situation in your family where somebody's ill, it's bringing that a bit more to life with the client, with the child, as to whether, there's a financial stress to that, or there's a claim that's helped out that family. Obviously, it's depending on the age of the child, but I think there's a lot more that as advisors and as parents especially that you could do to get children more aware of it. I'm not sure schools are going to adopt it so much. There's more being done, I know, from the government perspective, so the Money Advice Service is now changing. We're lobbying there to say, can they be doing more to bring it, more awareness to, I said, not just children, but actually parents first. But I think, as parents, I think we all have a responsibility to get our children to be more and more aware of it. We do it with savings, but, very much more about protecting as well.
Jackie, is there anything Scottish Widows do?
Yeah, so we're part of Lloyds Banking Group, so we're involved in the sort of financial education in schools, which I think is a great starting point, because we know that about 50% of the adults in the UK have the financial literacy of an 11-year-old. So how do you keep it simple and get people thinking about finances instead of procrastinating and putting things off? I think there's a huge opportunity to do more with employers in the workplace. So I came from the pensions arena before I came into protection, and a huge move in the pensions arena through auto-enrolment has been to bring much more education and engagement into the workplace. And people do trust their employer, so employers tend to make the time available for you to go along to sessions and find out about things. And I think if we can make sure that that isn't just pensions, it's protection being one of the more basic needs, it's all of your financial planning that you need to think about. I think that's a real opportunity for the protection industry, how to support that sort of workplace education, workplace well-being, which is really big on the agenda for employers nowadays.
So again then, Craig, is that actually maybe even starting at the executives of the employers, as we know a lot still don't take the business insurance, getting them engaged to then try and roll it out into the employees?
I think that's a really, really good idea. I think the reality is, if we can reach out to customers and potential customers through employers, through the education programme, there's lots of different ways, I think, and lots of different media to do it. I think we've had some really interesting sort of success in terms of some of our direct campaigns at the moment. We're doing quite a lot of YouTube channel type videos where we're talking about what makes a child frightened, for example. So we're not mentioning protection at all, but we're looking at the real sort of understanding of what makes us as human beings safe and feel safe. And so almost talking about the outcomes of protection and what protection may bring you before we get to the point of actually you might want to think about buying some protection. So I think on a number of levels, we need to start thinking further back up the chain, which is actually, as a parent, my children need to feel safe. And if I lost my job, or if I died, or if I got ill, what would that mean? So for me, there's definitely more we can do in the narrative and the storytelling around what the benefit of protection brings.
And I know you've got a radio campaign on at the moment, haven't you, about that?
Yeah.
And I know Scottish Widows have a TV advertising campaign going on. So how can we capitalise even on all of this media attention that providers are doing? How can the advisor community capitalise on this?
So I think advisors are really well placed, because they are having conversations with customers who've come to them about their financial needs. And we know protection is a product that is sold rather than bought. So consumers tend to put other things first. Certainly from our research, they're more likely to put other priorities first, and protection's way down the line, partly I think because there isn't a tangible thing. You might pay all this money in and never actually get anything, and that's a good result, because that means you haven't got ill or had a family bereavement. So I think for advisors, it's that opportunity to make sure that in the fact-find process that you're understanding what's important, and really thinking about how you can capitalise on when customer circumstances change, So it's at that point that you might be taking your first house together, starting a family, moving jobs. These are all the sort of life events where there's a good opportunity for an advisor to connect up and say, well, wait a minute, what happens if one of you loses your job? Are you protected? Have you thought about that? What savings have you got? You've got the most information really outside of the bank really on that customer's personal circumstances. So I think it's about using that and thinking about how do you tap into some of the providers' engagement tools to help customers understand what they need.
And Carl, do you think advisors should be as bold as actually sending direct mails or emails or however they communicate to their clients saying, have you seen the Scottish Widows advert, have you heard the energy, have you heard anything that other providers, so historically the EV were saying, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I think so. And actually, I think if you go back to the TV advertising bit to start off with, you see adverts across the board for, car insurance or house insurance or pet insurance. And these are insurances that clients are buying every day. But we all know that they're not buying protection insurance as quickly as they are buying the others. So it's actually, when you're tapping into talking to a client and the fact finding and everything else, is actually bringing to life what insurances they already have. And then talking about, well, this is just another insurance. And actually, where are your assets? Is it the dog or is it actually your income, for instance? And as Jackie was saying, and the other people said earlier on, there's lots of tools that exist out there, not just the TV stuff, but on our websites, external ones like Seven Families. And I think these tools are there for advisors to use to get the right message across. I wouldn't say just take anyone and use it for all your clients. If that works, then fine, but actually try and think of the ones that will work for your particular clients.
We continuously talk about the protection gap. I'm getting more mature now as every year passes, and that figure doesn't seem to change. It's as if it's an unobtainable figure. So should we not really be talking about a protection gap, but change that emphasis about talking to advisors' clients' needs?
Yeah. I think you're right. I think the protection gap is a well-versed topic. We all say 1 in 3 mortgages are protected. What's more about the other 2/3, for example? I think the reality is, the products are out there and they are helping people, but of course we could do more to protect more customers. I think, so it's a great point to say people think more about pet insurance than they do about their own lives, which is, is probably a fairly sad indictment of the protection industry, actually. So I think the more we can do to tell stories and really sort of engage customers in a different way, and it's not just, the fear factor, if you like, the what ifs, it's the real benefit, making it more relevant to everyday lives, and having products where customers, can engage with more frequently, not just buy it and put it on a shelf, whether that's through sort of features and benefits, which might make it more relevant, whether it's through having a really sort of robust contact strategy where you're speaking to your customers at key moments in their life, so they're really thinking about protection when they have a baby or get married. So absolutely, I think the protection gap is probably a path well trodden, and we should all probably think of different ways to engage.
And Jackie, is it potentially maybe when talking to advisors, when your BDMs, your account manager on the road, is actually not talking about protection gap, but just saying what percentage of your client bank is protected, and how can we move you from 30 to 35 or 50 to 55 or even 80 to 85, which would be great.
Yeah.
How do we narrow it to an advisor's own world?
I think being able to do that and think about your clients is one way of doing it. I'm almost thoughtful about, is there more across the industry as well, actually? So again, I'm thinking about, in my pensions world, the pensions dashboard, which is, here are all the pensions policies that you've got, this is what you've got in the state pension. And there has been some discussion in the industry about, should consumers get a statement that say, this is your state benefits you would be entitled to, this is your employer benefits you would be entitled to or not, and actually, do you think that's enough? That sort of real prompting into sort of steering into what the reality could be should the worst happen. I think consumers are absolutely oblivious to, a lot of people think they're going to get more money from the state should the worst happen. And with welfare reform, which is only going in one direction, I think there's a real opportunity to think about what could you do that would actually be educating customers. And then from an advisor's point of view, then all you're doing is adding on to that and starting to get right into what's important to you then, and then matching the right products to meet the customer's needs.
Okay. And call that area of that fine line between justifiable anxiety and disturbance. So then I think just put advisors off sending out email marketing campaigns to talk to their clients about it. I agree those case studies are brilliant, but how close is that to disturbance if you sent it out?
I think, again, you go back to that protection gap. So, I'm not expecting an advisor sat in front of their PC right now to think, right, how am I going to close that gap in the next couple of days? And they're not going to close that gap on their client bank in the next couple of days. But actually, it's small steps. So why doesn't those advisors watching today think, okay, my next client, I'm going to think about how do I close the gap with that client? So talk to that client about their protection gap. And yet, you know, justifiable anxiety, not disturbance anymore. But I think we do, unfortunately, live in a society where we have to move clients that direction. You know, we probably use it as far too much as a throwaway comment that, you know, protection is sold and not bought. But it is true, you know, as I said, it is a sad indictment that we'll insure our dog before we insure ourselves. So I think it is an advisor's responsibility. It's the great thing that advisors do, is to move a client in that right direction that says, actually, this is the scary stuff about you, not the scary stuff about the market, the protection gap overall, but actually for you, Mr. and Mrs. Client, I've had a look at your portfolio, your fact find, and these are the gaps, and this is what we should be doing about it. And actually, yeah, bringing in the scary stuff with it as well.
Great. Carl mentioned money advice service. Do you think the government should be doing more to actually promote the needs of insurance?
I think they probably could, actually. I think whether they will or not, given some of the other priorities across government, is a question mark. But for me, I think absolutely. I think the interesting point to build on what Carl said is, you know, we've done quite well established now the deadline to the breadline research, which L&G does, and some of the numbers are quite frightening. I think the average family in the UK will run out of cash in 32 days if their income was stopped today. So, you know, I think using some of those, you know, really critical messages and helping advisors talk about the really powerful stats, actually. You know, the average UK person has less than £6,000 in the bank. How long would that last you if you lost your job today? So I think particularly around, I think we've talked around, you know, the income protection gap in particular. Actually, probably income protection is more powerful than anything in circumstances like that. So, you know, yes, government can do more, but I think, you know, collectively, you know, absolutely we can do more to keep repeating that message and making it easy for customers to A, understand the need, and B, to actually transact and buy it.
I think it's what I was going to say as well. I think there's ways of simplifying the advice process as well. So, you know, so we have Research Income Roulette, which on a similar vein, you know, talks about the gaps and people who have cover and don't have cover and their needs. But actually, if you look at deadline to breadline, now I talk about that quite a lot with advisors. I said not to use the research, but actually what I say to them is, yeah, if you want to use the research, use the research. And if you want to show your client stats, show them stats. But actually, what deadline to breadline essentially is an advisor sits down with the client, looks at their outgoings, looks at their incomings, gets a calculator and tells the client how long they've got left. Not the average is, but actually why not say to your client, actually I've sat down with a calculator, all the figures I've got in front of me, yourself has 19 days. You know, that's how long your money's going to last you for. Not the average in the area or anything else. And I know we all produce these stats, but actually, you know, if an advisor did it with that client sat in the room, I think that's very powerful then. But it's using that principle of getting those messages across, but making it very real for the client.
And your research on the income protection, what was the focus of that and what was the outcome?
So, I mean, Income Roulette with us, we've just done a survey now of 9,000 people working with YouGov, and it's looking at, you know, what people have protection, how many don't. We split into 3 groups. We looked at what we call generation debt, which is the millennials, and largely those are renting as well. You look at the self-employed, and then you look at Middle Britain as well, the average family there that, you know, has a fairly decent income coming in, but also has pretty hefty expenditure as well. And there's no surprises there when you look at it. The no surprises are that, you know, again, if you look at the deadline to breadline, then that sort of example there, the government says, 90 days, sort of 3 months is what you should be looking at as savings. And it's around about a third of people think they could actually get that together. And I think we have all these stats out there. You know, all the stats are there, they are scary, and we can talk about the protection gap, but I think we have to go back to principles, which is how do you relate that to your client? And whether you do use those stats or whether you do use real terms and real life stuff with that client, that's the important stuff.
And Jackie, do you think the products that we have are fit for purpose in today's world?
So I think coming new into protection again after a few years, I think we've got all types of products. We're certainly not short of different products and product features. I think actually our challenge is, has it become too complicated for consumers? So, you know, things like critical illness definitions and all the different machinations there, I think if you were to ask the ordinary person on the street, they would just find all of that overcomplicated and in their minds a reason for not to pay a claim, actually. So there's a huge opportunity, I think, for us as providers to simplify our products, simplify the terminology, think about less definitions but with more cover. And I think if we can crack that, I think products will be seen as good value for money. I think another challenge is we assume people understand all the terminology. We did some testing on customers who had purchased term assurance, and we were testing out the difference between, did they understand level term, decrease in term? So we would all go, well, that's dead straightforward. That's probably the easiest product we've got. And they thought decrease in term assurance was decreasing contributions, not decrease in cover. And, you know, I think for advisors and the role there is, that's where you can add the most value, really helping to explain what all the different products are, matching your needs to that product and making sure you absolutely understand what you've bought.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very fair one, actually. You know, you talked in the sessions earlier on about products and the market and that sort of thing as well. We're in danger of overcomplicating the market. We really are. I think it's very complicated as it currently is. Do we go the route of completely simplifying it? I'm not sure. Yes, in some areas, but I think again it goes back to first principles, which is an advisor. I'm on a soapbox over this now, but I think it is an advisor talking to a client and finding out what that client's needs are, what that client's fears are as well. So asking the right questions within a fact find, so that when you are recommending a product and a solution, it fits the need of that client. Unfortunately, I think we get a little bit of a habit of picking products off a shelf. When actually, you know, there are tools out there like CI Expert, for instance, that if a client has expressed a certain fear or a history of illness within their family, you could be looking at a CI policy that actually pulls out something that's specific to that client, that, you know, sort of allays those particular fears, and then the client buys into it better.
If it's hereditary.
Yeah, it could be hereditary, it could be something they've experienced within their family group, the family circle, friends. You know, we talk about cancer an awful lot, but it could be a particular type of cancer that they've had experience of. And it could be that that's what will make them buy the product, is actually because they've experienced a particular illness. And that could be what makes them keep the product as well, because it is the fear that they have. Whereas perhaps we're trying to sell them something that we think that is their fear. Why not ask them, see what experience they've had of illnesses, see what their fears are, and see how that relates to the products we're talking about.
Great.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think you know, clearly the current products have done a job, and maybe that's the reason the protection gap is probably levelled off where it is. They've taken us to a level of helping customers protect their lives, but for me, you know, probably still too complicated. I mean, L&G's not tried to join the arms race of conditions. I mean, the reality is, you know, 80% of kit claims is still paid on the top 3 conditions. So, you know, why do we need 150? So I think we need to look at different ways of protecting individuals. So for me, if I lost my job, as I've said before, if I became ill, if I died, there's 3 potential outcomes, maybe some others in between, but actually we have quite a complicated suite of products that protect those needs. So I think there probably is time for a rethink, actually. I think looking at how we can make the products sweet, simpler to understand, maybe some hybrids will emerge over time, maybe the way to go. So for me, I think clearly the products do a great job, but by making them simpler and more relevant to customers, we could help more customers. For sure.
Is it just simplifying the wording rather than actually narrowing the product? So I suppose I'm a consumer.
Yeah.
If I have a heart attack, I have a heart attack.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's one type of heart attack or the other. As far as I'm concerned, I've had a heart attack. So is it not that simple, or is that just a little naive on
Yeah,
my
well,
behalf?
I think it probably should be, actually. I think the reason we've ended up with complex, definitions is because it's based on underwriting and fair value for customers. So, you know, there is currently clearly a very clear link between the questions you ask and the premium that's paid. So we ask for more information and we set definitions to give customer good value, actually. But, you know, that's created complexity. So maybe there is you know, we need to step back and use, you know, things like data and, you know more accessible medical records, etc. to, I'm not saying stop asking the questions, but, you know, using data to answer the questions in a different way. So for me, it's about simplifying the product, but in some ways making it more comprehensive, not complicated, if that makes sense.
And so how do we, once it's been sold, how do we stop it being cancelled? So how do we stop it just being a direct debit that, as we mentioned before, some people worry about sending an annual statement out because it might make the client question it and cancel it? How do we...
I mean, so an annual statement I think is a start, and I think you're right, historically we've worried that that's a trigger where people go, wait a minute, I'm paying 20 quid into this thing, I could be using that for something else. I think turning that into something that's more engaging, so, you know, I think in one of your earlier sessions, this exact topic around should it be an app, should it be something electronic, certainly that's your opportunity to reinforce why it's worth doing. You know, and if you think about some of the things that you have on your phone today where you're getting nudged to be healthier, or you're getting nudged, you know, if you've ever done any of the diet ones, believe me, every day they're sending you things saying, exactly, you haven't logged your food yet, you must have eaten something you're too terrified to put in. You know, but there must be an opportunity to tap into technology as a positive and actually have a regular dialogue with customers so that they feel that, you know, actually I've got peace of mind here. I mean, let's face it, for most people, that's the main thing they get out of taking out their protection policy on day one. Peace of mind, I know I should have done this, I've done it, I've protected my family. How can you sort of get those reinforcement messages rather than wait till they've gone as far as cancelling the direct debit and then we swoop in and jump into action and start wondering why we're going to see a lapse. So I think building on innovation and technology has got to be the way forward, and I think you've got to communicate with customers. I think that's better than hoping they'll never notice that the money's coming out their bank account.
And Carl, how do we help advisors with that as well, so that they understand the importance of it?
Yeah, so I think again, you're sat down with a client as an advisor with them for an hour, maybe 2 hours as a protection conversation, especially if it's mortgage related. You know, once they've signed on the dotted line, they start to lose interest immediately then in talking to you as an advisor. So you've got that limited window to get across to a client something that they shouldn't be cancelling for 25 years perhaps. So how do you get that across? And I think there's a number of ways to do that. So so we use the term quite loosely of protection being sold and not bought. And I think we all actually around the table and advisors alike, we have to remember that the client has to buy into it as well. So there has to be a buying there as well. And there's lots of ways to do that. As I said, it's looking at the product you're recommending, making sure it actually really does fit the need. I think it is embedding the need for protection. So there's lots of tools out there that we all offer that really embed that need for protection. But also you talked about in earlier sessions about added benefits. So, you know, it's then talking about what else comes with a policy. Because if you... It's the most unfortunate lottery you can ever be in, isn't it? To have a policy, a protection policy, because if you get the payout, then something terrible's happened in your life. But it is a lottery. So actually, the good news is if you've never used it, never needs the payout in 25 years. But how's that going to make you remember to keep that policy for 25 years if you hadn't had a payout? And if you look at the added benefits, these are very tangible things that can be used day one. So it might be the client sees it on their bank statement, but relates to it for something they're using every day. It's like you mentioned earlier about second opinion, best doctors, or these could be right down to things like we do a remote GP, or it could be we have one of our member benefits where the client gets access to a legal helpline, and it could have been that they were ringing up because their neighbour's conifers were too high. But these are all little things that come with a policy, and we all offer them. But these are tangible things that mean it's not the lottery payout, but it keeps it front of mind with the client, as well as, and I do go what Jackie says here, we can do more to actually help keep it front of mind as well.
And I think that's the challenge, isn't it? Because it's the same with your GI, you got your legal expenses, you got your bank accounts where you're probably covered for your mobile phone, but we all still then take out another mobile phone insurance and lots of other things. How do we get the consumer to actually understand it's not just the policy that they've taken out that they think they've got all those other areas? Yeah.
Well, I certainly agree with Jack. I think, just keeping back and hoping no one notices is definitely not the way to go. So I think regular contact. I think the brands that are engaging with their customers on a regular and frequent basis and are nudging them to think about different things, are offering new and different benefits to the product to make it more relevant, are the ones that will probably go on to succeed more than most. So for me, there are lots of different ways you can do that and lots of different media to do that. And I think it probably starts with segmenting and understanding your customers and having a strategy to communicate with them in a way that works for them, which might be a text message reminder. You might be using big data or your client databases to understand someone's maybe expecting a child or having getting married. So all of these different life events and triggers for me should be a way for us to regularly engage with customers and talk to them about protection.
I suppose it's back to that. If you're not engaging with your clients, you won't know that they've had a life issue, a child, marriage, divorce, all those things. How do advisors continue that regular review period? If it's a mortgage advisor, it's probably linked to the mortgage, but that could be 2-5 years. I suppose in the wealth space, it may be easier because you'd be having regular reviews about the pension and the investments. But how do we embed that and also then get the consumer to value that, and it's not just perceived as another yearly sales pitch?
So, I mean, I think You've hit the nail on the head with where advisors would interact today. So if you were a wealth advisor, and certainly my financial advisor, I feel like I've just seen him and he's another appointment back in, you know. And that'll be different for different customers, how often they see their financial advisor. Did they do a one-off advice payment, which only covered that point in time? So, you know, for providers, maybe we could support and say, you know, if we're prompting your customer, and most of the stuff that we would prompt would recommend that you go back to your financial advisor to get advice on the follow-up. I think it's about making sure, therefore, that if we're prompting, that we're directing you back to your financial advisor. If you haven't already got, I guess, a regular review in with that client, I guess it must be quite unusual to have standalone protection and nothing else in today's world. I suspect most people it's in line with something else, isn't it?
There's some models that are protection only models that we have. Telephony
and maybe referral, referral in. So I don't know what everyone does, but
I think we could probably look to other industries. Actually, I think there's lots of talk around different models, and the bit at the end is how do you care for existing customers. So. You know, it could be something as simple as a birthday card or a reminder, something just to recontact, whatever piece of information you can use to, you know, re-engage with customers in new and different ways, I think help. And I think possibly other industries do that really well. And it's something we can look at the wider consumer space and take lessons from how these brands are regularly interacting with their customers and maybe take the lead from some of those lessons.
I think it's getting an interesting mix right there, isn't it? Because I'm always just intrigued that whenever you go to an event and you hear a successful advisor, you know, somebody who's had a long-standing business and has a very good protection portfolio and clients as well, the stuff that advisor talks about and how they run their business. You know, I've been in this industry 20 odd years. You don't hear anything new, really. Actually, these advice, it's a lot of old school stuff that they still do, and it's like the birthday cards. And I think there's more. It's getting the mix right, because I think we are going to move into the more technological world. And as you say, there are different areas of business which sort of adopt that better, perhaps, than we do as an industry. But yeah, you know, I think back to basics, and it is amazing how many advisors I speak to have very successful businesses. And yeah, they do the simple stuff. They do the birthday cards, they do the Christmas cards. Actually, what they might do is use marketing hubs, these sort of things, so they create newsletters. So they're just, I think where an advisor and a client relationship perhaps doesn't work to get that appointment in is where the client does see it as, this is just a sales pitch. And I think that happens when it comes out of the blue. So it's when an advisor's perhaps looking at their back book and thinking, right, I've not done this for a while, I should actually see who I need to ring. If it's out of the blue, then yeah, it can come across, unfortunately, the wrong way. But as I said, if you can keep in constant contact, use the newsletters, and make sure your clients know who you are.
I think GDPR is going to be an interesting, potentially opportunity for advisors to re-engage with their client bank. Because we're going to have to get those bespoke permissions again to continue talking. So I think if there's nothing else, I wouldn't say wait till the last day, but no, over the next few months is start that re-engagement process so that you've actually got the ongoing permissions to do that, but add in those reviews. So I'll start with you, Carl, on this one. What single improvement do you think providers could see or do to help advisors sell more? The big question. The big question.
You know, I know it is a bit LV, this one, but the risk calculator we brought out a couple of years ago, and I worked on that project when we brought it out, and the risk reality calculator, and I still think it is an immense tool for an advisor and for a client. It makes it. We talk about simplicity. You know, it's a very, very simple web-based tool that goes back to that justifiable anxiety that sort of scares the billy out your client a little bit, which just says, do you know what, for you as a client, for your age group, for the amount of time that you're looking for a policy or a mortgage for, these are the percentages, chances of you getting ill, being off work for 2 months or more, or actually dying. And it goes back to, as I said, just putting those facts in front of a client. But as I said, for the risk calculator, we bespoke it to that client and their age rather than going too generic. But yeah, we've had real success with that, and we've seen a lot of big firms have had real success. But I just don't think it's adopted well enough. I think that more advisors could adopt that. It's not really branded, it's not an LV thing as such, and it's client facing. So we talk an awful lot about, you know, the man down the pub, the bloke down the pub, or the person down the pub who's going to tell you that you don't need protection for all these reasons. And it's probably the advisor's biggest nemesis is the bloke down the pub. I like to think the risk calculator actually could be, you know, the competition for that. And if you've got people actually sat in the pub, and I know one of your sessions talked about earlier on, actually sharing scary facts with their, or these sort of details with their mates around a pint, then actually it just gets that awareness up and gets client to buy into the fact that we do need protection. So for me, yeah, I know it's an LV thing, but I'm a firm believer of the risk calculator because it doesn't direct people to any LV product, it's just about identifying the risk.
Great.
I think similarly, it's about making the products less complicated and easier to access and more relevant. So Legal in General, I think, is fairly well publicised. I've done a Selfie Quote sort of
We've used it a
piece of
few
work.
times
Yeah,
today,
but it's a great way of getting people talking about protection. So, you know, they'll be coming to the UK before the end of the year, so advisors can use that just as a way of saying it's a bit of fun. It's you know, it's not a sort of detailed quote, but it's an indicative quote. So how did we do? It's just getting people talking about protection in a simple way. It's using clearly, you know, photography rather than question sets to give you an instant indicative quote. So I think for me, the less complicated, the more engaging we make protection, I think the more chance we've got of closing this protection gap that we're all talking about.
Jackie?
Mine would be, how can we make it easier for advisors? So we heard earlier around the length of the mortgage application process, for example, and all the different customer journeys that advisors have to learn for all the different providers. So to me, innovations like Underwrite Me, where they're trying to take some of that complexity out, makes it a bit tougher for us to compete. But I think, you know, if you only have to learn one system, one way of doing things, and you're getting not just the base price, but also the base terms, has got to take effort out for the advisor and make it easier to have that conversation alongside mortgage or whatever other needs you're meeting.
Okay, thank you all. That concludes the third of our presentations, chats today. Thank you all for listening. Thank you again to Craig, to Jackie and to Carl. If you want to watch them again, they will be online in our hub later on during this week. We hope you've enjoyed it. Look forward to the L&G Selfie as it comes out, and thank you all for your support, and speak to you again soon.